Those are friends, aren't they? Yes,
Okay.
Well, I just call them.
How you doing?
Hanging out. Getting tired.
You can tell a couple times a day it looked like you were about half.
I've been trying to find like music to listen
3 more
to on my
months.
phone. I know. Just to like keep my up awake.
It was funny last week. I think how much a big wheel heads up. As many as I can.
I had those for finding this, and I'd rather just have something there. It's just,
Yeah, sometimes you can't help
and
it.
I was actually planning on maybe trying to make it.
Yeah.
Your microphones are all
I was
on.
going to
This is very nice.
What's that? Took me an hour to get from here.
Yes.
So by the time I got there, it was like 6:30 or 6:45.
Good evening. Welcome to the December 2nd, 2019 meeting of the Shawnee Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call. Commissioner Montgomery. Commissioner Roth. Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Willoughby. Here. Commissioner Bienhoff is absent. Commissioner Busby is here. Commissioner Wise. Here. Commissioner Braley. Here. Commissioner Smith. Here. Commissioner Bingham. Commissioner Nunick.
Here.
Thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we'll change the notes to say that Commissioner Beanhoff is here, we welcome him.
Guys, for being late.
Not a problem, Bruce. Consent item agenda 1 is listed under the consent items agenda unless there is a request to remove the item from the consent agenda. The item will be approved in one motion. Is there a request to remove the item from the consent agenda? Commissioner Montgomery.
Well, there's only one item, but, so I guess I would like to remove that item for a possible, for a revision that I think we need.
Very fine. In that case, since we don't have the motion is gone now. So, Commissioner Montgomery, would you please say what you want to change?
I just noticed in the minutes that it refers on subsequent reference Commissioner Smith as Commissioner J. Smith. And I think that's referring to a previous commissioner, and we only have one Commissioner Smith now, so.
And that's we'll call that just a clerical error and a change in the clerical, correction in the clerical error.
Yeah, should I make a motion to approve with that change?
Is there a second? Commissioner Weiss.
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion, a second, to approve the minutes as per the single correction. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Under new business, SUP 0419-12. Incredible Pizza located at 13110 West 67th Terrace. Special use permit approval. Staff? Isn't Stephanie?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. Stephanie Mullenborg, Community Development. I'll be doing a short presentation for the special use permit request for Incredible Pizza. They are located at 13110 West 62nd Terrace here in Shawnee. And we do have a public hearing tonight for this item. As you can see on the screen, the project location is shown sort of on the east side of Shawnee, along Shawnee Mission Parkway, just to the east of Flum. And you can see with that yellow star, the project location in relation to the borders of the city. The surrounding zoning in the area includes CN, which is commercial neighborhood, R1, which is single family residential, PD, planned development, which is also residential, CH, which is commercial highway, and PUDOC to the south, which is a planned unit development with office and commercial. The subject property is zoned CN and is listed as a commercial land use in our future land use guide within the comprehensive plan. You can see the Incredible Pizza site highlighted, the building in red there on the screen, and the property parcel boundary in the dark red line on the screen. At our last Planning Commission meeting on November 18th, just to refresh everyone's memory, we did talk about Incredible Pizza at that meeting, and we were approved for a sign variance as well as facade changes. So we just wanted to talk about that briefly tonight because lighting is a factor that we want to talk about with special use permits, especially when the building is adjacent to residential. They will be restricted to the height of those columns with a maximum of 45 feet. And those blue columns will have some lighting effects in them that will not be detrimental to the surrounding residential, and they will be turned off after hours of operation. So we wanted to clarify that for the record for the special use permit. There was a previous tenant in this building, that would be Power Play, who recently went out of business and sold the property to Incredible Pizza. The previous tenant, Power Play, did have a special use permit for a similar type of use, that was reviewed back in March of 2018. As a part of special use permit reviews, we do take a look at police reports and other complaints that may have been filed for the property. And in this case, the police reports that were filed between 2014 and 2018 were related to theft. At this time, we don't recommend any actions regarding the operation of the business, and that the applicant will be planning to include additional lighting and security cameras in the parking area to keep their guests safe and secure. So there will be some upgrades to the site in relation to safety, so hopefully we don't get any of those theft or safety issues with the new tenant, Incredible Pizza. The proposed Incredible Pizza family entertainment business will be renovated from the former Power Play business. The floor plan includes 4 large themed dining rooms, a buffet, 10 private party rooms, a game room with 150 games, and carnival-type attractions and rides. They do plan on having beer and wine in the restaurant area as well. And the finished floor area is about 73,000 square feet, and the building occupant load is about 2,700 people. Based on the information provided to date from the applicant and our staff review, we are recommending approval of SUP 041912, granting a special use permit for an indoor recreational use for Incredible Pizza with the following conditions. All lighting on the exterior facade, which extends above the roof line, must be turned off outside of business operating hours. The operating hours shall be limited to 11 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night, Sunday through Thursday, and 11 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night on Friday and Saturday. A license shall be obtained from the city for all coin-operated devices, as well as an annual occupational license. There shall be no trash pickup, street sweeping, or deliveries made to the site between the hours of 10 o'clock p.m. and 7 o'clock a.m. per city code, and it's subject to review in 1 year. And that concludes the staff report for this item.
Thank you, Stephanie. Is the applicant present? If you come forward and state your name and address, please, sir.
My name is Donald Potvin. My address is 4510 South Frisco Trails Road, Springfield, Missouri.
Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Beanhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clarification, a question, Stephanie. You didn't mention that the applicant purchased the property, but the attachment that was in the packet states they reached a lease agreement, so I'm curious if it was purchased.
We purchased the business Power Play, but we are leasing the property from Power Play Partners, LLC.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then also on the street sweeping, if I remember correctly, and I may not be, that I thought in commercial properties you could have other operation of trash pickup and cleaning of the parking lots. I noticed the trash is behind next to residential, but the parking lot would not. Would that have the same restriction since it's not next to residential in the parking lot?
Per city code, it's not allowed to take place between those designated hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
For residential or commercial?
For any of the commercial property, so whether it's the front or the back.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Bailey.
Yeah, thank you. I just have one quick question. It's parsing words on recommendation 3, where it says a license shall be obtained from the city for all coin-operated machines. I've been to a couple locations, not this particular location, but gaming locations with my kids, and they're not all coin-operated. There's cards and other things. Does that need to be clarified, or is it understood that that's a generic term? That could you just clarify that a little bit on what a coin-operated machine would be?
The intent is the same. I know a lot of these types of gaming establishments do now have like a swipeable credit card that's preloaded. I believe for licensing purposes, we probably still count those as coin operated. But if you would like to stipulate in the recommendation a clarification that says the necessary licensing for any game devices and kind of generalize that. We can take a look at that with our business licensing specialist and our city clerk if necessary and make sure we're getting the appropriate licenses.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Commissioner Peterson?
This is another one for city staff, is street sweeping. I know that a lot of commercial entities will hire for snow removal. Does that fall under street sweeping or anything like that? Because keeping them to those hours could be difficult and they won't be back towards the room. Just street sweeping. Great, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Nunick?
Questions for the applicant. Familiar with Power Play to a certain degree. This sounds like it's more family oriented than the prior occupant. Can you, not a long explanation, but kind of give us a difference from what it was when it was Power Play?
Sure. Incredible Pizza Company is themed around the 1950s. So when you walk in the door, we'll have a fully restored 1957 Chevy right there in the lobby. Black and white tiles. The dining rooms are themed like there's a high school gymnasium theme, Leave It to Beaver family room theme, a Starlight drive-in movie theater theme. Like the walls will be all like night sunset and a big movie screen. So sort of a 50s family theme. The owners and founders, Rick and Cheryl Barsness, really loved the 50s and when they were growing up during that period of time, and they just kind of thought that was very family oriented. And so the design of the building is centered around the families getting together in these different dining rooms.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions for applicant or staff? I have a question or a point, and that is the applicant may have to respond to part of this, and that is you're adding some extra lighting to the building there that we haven't seen yet? Is that correct?
No, sir. The only exterior lighting was when we came forward a number of weeks ago to go over the sign package.
Okay.
I do need to check with Stephanie, though. We are going to be replacing the pole lights with LED fixtures instead of the fixtures that are in the current parking lot lights to save on energy and to provide a little better down lighting, not out, but to get the light of the parking lot. Part of our security process is making sure we have plenty of light in the parking lot at night for the safety of our guests. So if I need to apply for permission on that, I'll get that through Stephanie.
For LED lighting, staff is not concerned about light spillage as much as with previous lighting sources and the current type of fixtures that are out there. The LED technology is actually much easier to direct to certain areas, so we shouldn't see any detrimental light spillage effects toward the residential. And of course, the police department and city staff and community development would be supportive of making sure the parking lot is adequately lit to prevent some of those theft calls that we've had in the past at this location.
Right, and in lieu of those issues they've had in the past, which certainly has nothing to do with this gentleman and his business, but it would seem to me when we were talking in here in the notes that they'll be required to turn the lights off at the end of business day. It would seem to me we might consider that maybe off within an hour after their business closes, which would give a little more time for the last people leaving to have a fully lit parking lot. And yet we're saying it right after, we're saying it, exterior lighting will be closed at the end of each business day. And I wonder if we shouldn't change that to saying a half hour something after that. I realize it's a technicality, but I really think that's more beneficial to him as well as his customers. Stephanie, please.
The stipulation in the condition that staff has recommended applies only to lighting that extends above the roof line. So if the parking lot lights do not extend above the roof line, I'm not sure of their current height, and I'm not sure of the current roof line height based on this drawing, but we would check that, and we would also be understanding about wanting to make sure the parking lot's adequately lit. And I believe some of these parking lots actually maintain lighting for several hours after close of business or throughout the evening.
And we do.
And
for safety of the employees, because they leave sometimes 2 hours after close. So our parking lot lighting will stay on sometimes till midnight or 1 in the morning when the employees leave. It's just not safe for them to go out in the dark.
Very fine, thank you. Yes,
And-
Stephanie?
And the parking lot lighting could be something that we revisit in a year and see if there's any complaints or issues, if they are to leave it on continuously throughout the evening. It's really for safety purposes, and it's not directly adjacent to the residential area, so the benefits of the safety outweigh concerns for light spillage in this particular scenario for lighting on the south side of the facade.
Thank you. Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, even though this is just a special use permit, then is there anyone from the audience that wishes to comment on this matter? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone from the audience wish to comment on this matter? Seeing no one, then we would be in commission discussion. Commissioner Peterson.
I move that we approve SUP-04-19-12 Incredible Pizza located at 13110 West 62nd Terrace special use permit per staff instructions.
Is there a second? Commissioner Montgomery.
I second the motion.
The motion is second to approve SUP 0419-12 for Incredible Pizza located at 13110 West 62nd Terrace special use permit. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on, Z10-19-1 and Z11-19-12 and SP 3219-12 Bellmont Promenade located at 16,100 to 16,300 West 66th Terrace, rezoning from PUDMR to commercial highway and residential high-rise. Yes, Doug Allman.
Good evening, Doug Allman, Community Development. I do want to say this is being zoned from PUDMX, which is our mixed-use district, to residential highways and commercial highway. For those of you that aren't familiar with the site, most of you are. We have a history with the site. It is located at the southwest corner of Shawnee Mission Parkway in Mauer. It's part of an overall 27-acre site that is a horizontal mixed-use development, including inline retail, restaurants, and some pad sites along Mauer. The proposal is to rezone property that was originally zoned PUDMX to RHR, approximately 5.8 acres, and then the remaining portion zoning it back to commercial highway so that it can be blended into the existing commercial highway zoning that's along Mauer at the southeast corner of the site. Just to familiarize yourselves with the original proposal, if you recall, there were approximately 248 residential units in 4- and 5-story buildings. That was mixed use with vertical components to it. There was approximately 12,000 square foot of commercial leasing space and some retail frontage on that original approval, and thus the PUDMX zoning. Over time, that developer, Bach Homes, decided to withdraw their participation in this project. I believe they found that there were some difficulties in terms of parking and other things related to the site. And so Legacy, the overall developer of the acreage, began searching for a new apartment developer, and they partnered with JPL and actually were able to come up with a plan that is 2 buildings rather than 248 units. There's 148 units in 2 4-story buildings. And then the parking itself is more self-contained on the site. If you remember with the last proposal, there was considerable shared parking with the retail to the east and the retail to the north. There was more than likely going to be cross parking that would be required across 66 Terrace. There's a series of sidewalks. We will still have that connectivity and the opportunity for people to park over there and visit if they like, because we do want internal connectivity of the residential component to the horizontal mixed use. but in talks with the applicant. The number of units, the mix of units that they're proposing, on-site parking, including the garage units, will be more than efficient and enough to satisfy their site independently of the remainder of the shopping center. This is a depiction of what that building looks like, the westernmost building from the adjacent property to the south. That's actually the closest residence to that. There was significant discussion over the past rezoning efforts on this property about that separation of the building and the building height. And as you can see from this depiction, not including the separation of the home from the north property line, there's still a separation of approximately almost 150 feet from the developer's property line to the back side of that building. So, and the impact of lessening that side to 4 stories has reduced visibility of that building to that closest resident to the south. This is essentially the layout. You can see it's 2 linear buildings. It does hug the right-of-way line for 66 Terrace. There was considerable discussion with the original proposal about the pool amenity that was over on the western side of the site. There was some concern from staff at the final development phase of how we would make that integrate with the right-of-way and actual construction of the street. There was also concern by the residents to the south and I think the property owner to the west about the noise that could be generated by that. And so this developer applicant has centralized that pool facility so that it's more centrally located for both buildings and essentially kind of more internalized that amenity rather than having it over on the west side. In terms of unit count, as I said, it's 148 units. That mix of units is approximately 8% studios, 38% one-bedroom units, 54% two-bedroom units. We talked about parking. They're actually proposing to provide just for the 148 units a total of 210 stalls. And again, there will be access to parking to the east and parking to the north through those shared sidewalk connections. Property to the north is overparked because it is a retail shopping center. So having that overflow parking, in staff's opinion, is more than adequate to service a project of this density and intensity. This is kind of a layout showing the 2 zoning areas with the footprint of the approved commercial to the north, the 2 buildings to the apartment buildings on the west side of the site, and then the newly zoned area that now affords, and again, this is a concept preliminary plan, the potential for a pad site with a larger sit-down type facility just to the east of the first building, the first residential building there. All the original conditions of approval, including landscape massing, fencing along that south property line, the termination of Bell Road as a cul-de-sac, native plantings over on the west side of the site are still integral to this approval. So not much has changed except that the intensity and density of the development has come down somewhat from the original approval, and the nature of the building is they're shorter essentially in height. In terms of elevations, these are a little different than what you may remember from the first approval. Varied roof lines, quality building materials, and in comparison to the PUDMX zoning, there is more masonry on this unit. On both of these units, the ground floor is covered with brick veneer, and it has a varied look to it, a modern look, but at the same time, with the varied roof line not being so linear that it will be monotonous in design. This is a look from the south, kind of up in the air, looking over the pool at the easternmost building. As you can see, there are privacy balconies on the majority of the units. There is a large workout facility and a common area enclosed in a building over on the west side of that building 1, with internal amenities that are popular with today's in today's marketplace. That's a very quick overview of the project. I can get into more details if you have questions. Because this is a rezoning from PUDMX to RHR and PUDMX to CH, if you decide to make approval for a motion of approval for both zonings, we would request that you do 2 motions, 1 for each zoning. and we would recommend that those be approved, subject to conditions listed in the staff report. And those are all 1 through 13, I believe. I would say there's a section in the report that was pointed out to me about the excise tax today from Commissioner Willoughby. I appreciate your thoroughness in reviewing these reports. That there's a reference to the Flum Road Benefit District. The spread for Flum Road was not this far west, and so that was a typing error. I appreciate you pointing that out. With that, we would conclude our report and ask if you have any questions of us and also of the applicant. They are here tonight as well.
Is the applicant present? Are you the applicant? If you come forward and state your name and address, please, ma'am.
Heather Trower, 4717 Central Street, Cranston City, Missouri, 64112.
Thank you. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations on this project?
I am.
Thank you very much. Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Montgomery.
I don't remember all the details of the previous proposal, but what has changed here that it's no longer complementary to PUDMX anymore?
If you recall, what the original proposal, Bach Homes had proposed an integrated retail and office portion into the building. The RHR district is strictly for residential uses. The PUDMX was required to allow or afford that small percentage of commercial square footage in the building. If you remember from that report, there were several deviations that caused in terms of setback, in terms of percentage of retail to the overall square footage of the building. To be very frank with you, this is a cleaner zoning district. This is the zoning district that was used to zone for the apartments at Westbrook Green. It's a standard high, as long as it's 4 stories or above, that's when the RHR kicks in, as long as there's no commercial element to it. And I would say, though, in the context of the overall development, you can't just look at the 5.8 acres. You're really looking at the context of 4 corners, 27 acres, 170,000 square foot of retail in the north, including a restaurant plaza with 3 separate restaurant facilities on the north side of 66 Terrace, and then the potential for 2 more or more, since this is concept, restaurants down at the southeast corner of the site. So that's the reason for the zoning request.
The previous one had some commercial on the ground floor with
Correct.
Apartments above.
I think the difficulty that they were finding is that there are typically apartment builders or commercial builders, and to bite off both chunks, they were having difficulty figuring out how to make it work, to be quite frank with you. And so in staff's opinion, this is obviously a less intense plan. There is still density. The idea is to have enough people living there to make the entire center thrive. But losing some units from that original approval does not give me concern. If anything, I think this will probably better than the original. We would have had people crossing 66 Terrace probably to walk if they were visiting someone in the apartment complex, which is fine, but this is probably a little bit safer.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Braley.
Yep, you'll come up next. This is for the applicant. And I bring this up only because a recent developer also brought this idea, and I noticed that you had covered parking. So 2 things. One, are you intending to have electrical charging stations on property for residents that might have electric vehicles? And then the other thing that they were attempting to do, which again I thought was a rather good idea, was trying to bring solar to the project, and you've got flat roofs on those garages. If that was anything that was in your thought for the project.
My name is David Braswell with JPL Development. Your first question had to do with solar. No, I'm sorry, with the electrical charging station. Yes, we'll have 2 electrical charging stations which will charge 4 vehicles at one time on the property. I can tell you I've done solar before, probably won't do it again. It's just not an economic benefit to us. Unless there's some magic rebate program out there, it's just doesn't, there's just no payback.
Yep. All right. Doug, this is probably a question for you. Looking at the preliminary site plan, I just want to touch on a couple of things. One, let's start with the sidewalks. I noticed if you're looking at the east side of the property, probably where the dog park grass area is, that sidewalk, there is no sidewalk that runs up to 66 Terrace, correct?
That's a good point, yes.
Okay, so that's one that, and that might be restricted because of the grass, but, or the dog area, but it sure would seem to me, again, from a resident standpoint, if you're exiting out on that side of the building towards the parking, you'd want to get to 66. You'd want to have the ability to do that by sidewalk rather than jumping out on the street. If you go over to the west side, the sidewalk only goes so far as to take you to the barbecue area. Is there a reason we can't get that also to extend fully up to the corner?
I don't think that there's a problem. There is some grade there, but again, this is a concept plan. We would certainly work with the applicant to get walkability. This is a horizontal mixed-use project, so every point of connectivity that we can achieve, we will.
Okay.
And we will work through those with the applicant. I think they heard it loud and clear, although JPO was not involved, Heather was involved. I think they heard loud and clear the amount of connectivity, north, south, east, and west that you guys wanted to see. And so we'll vet that as we go through the final development plan process and make sure that our engineers look at it too, to make sure that there's no safety issues where maybe a sidewalk may be dumping out that it shouldn't, where you're encouraging someone to cross the street to a connectivity point that's not on the north side. But we'll look at all of that in the context of the 27 acres.
Okay. And just to follow on, I think that you're including that, but I just want to make sure is then sort of those intersections there that are going to be crossing 66 Terrace. You know, we are concerned about safety, but what are we going to do at those intersections for pedestrian crossings if they're not going to be signalized? Are there traffic calming measures that we can use? I don't know what the long-term intent is, but make sure that's on your radar and that there is discussions about safely crossing because we want to encourage that as much as we can.
Yeah, I remember there was a lot of discussion about that during the PUDMX zoning, and we have not forgotten that, but those are final plan elements that we want to make sure that you guys were comfortable with the concept and the zoning use before we really poured a lot of time into this, but once they get, if they get through the process at final, we'll certainly look at every I and T, make sure they're all dotted and crossed.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
Commissioner Donick.
I don't know if it's for either applicant or staff, but just curious, neither pro nor con, the change in the number of units, what really drove that? Was it, I mean, is it just pure density issue or?
I would probably have the applicant answer that. They have a performer, I'm sure, that they can speak to.
The big difference between these two is roughly 100 units. And the first thing that we objected to was the lack of parking that was within the site. We didn't feel with that many units that we wanted that much shared parking. In our experience of 30 plus years of developing multifamily, we have a pretty good idea what works and doesn't work. So that was the first thing. The second thing is just the sheer market research showed us that we weren't willing to do as many units as the previous applicant. We were just more comfortable with a smaller project at this location at this time.
Any other, Commissioner Peterson?
I know this is a preliminary plan and we will get to other things, but like Commissioner Braley, I wanted to bring up a point. This is currently pasture or open space. We are now creating a retaining wall with a large parking lot, which I love the parking. I just would like to make sure that we're addressing all available avenues of current technology. Are we having anything designed into the parking garage for runoff that isn't directed to the four corners of a large parking lot that's raised 20 feet in the air? No waterfalls needed. So I was just curious if we were looking into any of those things where maybe it's impervious type of thing.
You've been on the commission for a while now. We've really studied this site. We know the watershed, the break, how detention is going to be handled. But again, we'll be getting final design of all of that. There has been relayed information to the new design engineer, Olson, who is on board. The same drainage patterns will be maintained where the Cooper's Pond will not be emptied. It will continue to receive water. I believe there's a vaulted detention that's going to be utilized on this. But those details, although we have a drainage narrative that basically says they can drain the site and handle excess drainage, we'll get into the meat of those details when we come back with the final plan. When they come back to you for final, they'll be at about 90% civil design. That's the general rule of thumb. They'll have the conceptual stormwater layout done. They'll have everything probably but the hydraulic calcs and the profiles of those lines. They'll also have the detention fully designed in terms of capacity and design, the type of detention that's going to be provided. And they'll also have their BMP worksheets, making sure that their stormwater quality is designed and meets the criteria of the city. But that's certainly details that you'll see at final development plan.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Commissioner Bellmont?
Yes, a follow-up to Commissioner Braley's question on vehicle charging stations. The 184 units for capability to charge 4 cars does not seem like much with the current trends in the automotive industry and the number of electric vehicles coming out to market. Can you?
I don't obviously know the answer to where we're going with that either. I would hope that there would be more stations for people to charge cars other than just at the property that we have. We'll own this project for a very, very long time. If there's a demand, we could certainly add more. We will hold this property. So the flexibility to increase that is there if we need to see, if we see it there.
Would you anticipate having ability in the garage spaces, electrical, for?
There's electric in the garage spaces.
That could be utilized?
By code, actually, but yes. Not a supercharge opportunity,
Sure.
but a plug-in, yes.
Okay. And I understand that there are charging stations around the city in different areas, but it's not very convenient to have to go there and leave your car to fill up if you have one of those vehicles. Also curious about the mix of apartment bedroom sizes and the amenities. I know the amenities were mentioned in the plan, but would you consider these to be higher end apartments?
Yes. Yeah. The amenity level is the workout room. We typically, you saw the dog park on the end. Typically, there's a pet washing facility within the property as well. We used to call them business centers. Now they're Wi-Fi oriented to the clubhouse. But yeah, it's the rent range will be $1.40 to $1.55 on a square foot basis. So 1,000 square foot unit, making that up, it would be, say, $1,500 a month. Center corridors, more preferred than open breezeways. There's many historic apartments you'll see around in, which we did years ago. Security, access privately, controlled access with a system that allows guests, to be enter through that system. Yeah, it's certainly a higher end product, yes.
And what about the number of
2 bedrooms?
1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom?
I believe we're approximately half and half. I mean, 1 bedroom and efficiencies versus 2 bedrooms. Again, market study dictates what we came up with there.
So about 50% two-bedroom and 50%.
Yeah, I think we're just shy of 50/50. Well, 54 twos.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions for applicant or staff? Seeing none, does anybody from the public wish to comment? I will read this before anybody comments, and that is, your comments are limited to only the matter under current consideration. I ask that your comments be concise, that you're respectful of all parties. If your comments are the same as previous speakers, then please be brief. We have not established a time limit, and we prefer not to. If you are not making any specific point or are long-winded, I will ask you to speed it up and eventually may ask you to stop. Please, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Don Lysett. I live at 6850 Bell Road, which is approximately a quarter of a mile to the south of there. As many of you know, I've been in front of you many times. I am pleased to say that we're actually here to be supportive of this. Take the shocks and looks away. I want to compliment the developer and staff for working with us in an effort to resolve what were some obvious deficiencies with this site on several proposals, but certainly the most reasonable one. And I have to chastise you just a tad. I think this shows that your zoning requirements and regulations are correct. The last time we were here, the last project, there was all kinds of deviations, variations from your rules. This project complies with virtually everything. It gets back to our point that we tried to make then, and why we are supportive now is this is a decent project. We're not overwhelmed by it. We're not excited about it in the sense of we're probably not going to be living there. But we are willing to look at this, look at it objectively, and say, yeah, this one makes sense, and it does. And again, I go back to what we'd said previously. Developers are way ahead of the game meeting with residents prior to our being here. Dusty Keaton, who lives directly south of this property, unfortunately is ill tonight. He asked me to speak on his behalf, and he is in favor of this proposal also. We have had some fairly extensive discussions about screening and landscaping. I realize this is not the final plan. We've been assured by the applicant that they will meet with us further down the road to bring that about, enhance that. So all that being said, we feel that this is a good use, a very reasonable use of the property. It's better quality, it's less dense. The parking situation, which before was a disaster, has been addressed. And I'm speaking as a representative of the Bell Road group, not just myself, we are not opposed to this project.
Thank you, Don. Does anybody else wish to comment? Seeing no one stepping forward, then we would be in commission discussion. Commissioner Peterson.
It's always difficult to figure out which way we're going to go, but I know that this is where we wanted to go, but me not being a developer, I couldn't say you should spend your money doing it this way. And I also like the fact that we very much did address the walkability issue with the parking across the street. I really like where we're going. I like what it looks. I'm thrilled that the residents are happy, or happier. And to me, I'm excited about this.
Anybody else? Does since we're in commission discussion? Well, this is about the exact opposite of the last meeting, which I can assure you is we're glad you're here, and we're always glad to hear from residents of the city on projects that we have to deal with. This discussion is hanging by a thread now. Commissioner Willoughby.
I move for approval of Z-10-19-12, rezoning of 0.7 acres of land from PUDMX to commercial highway, based on staff recommendations.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Roth.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of Z-10-19-1. And 1-2? Oh, it's not on my sheet. My apologies. Z-10-19-12. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Commissioner Wise.
I'll make a motion, we approve Z 1119-12, rezoning from PUDMX to RHR residential high-rise per staff recommendations.
Is there a second? Commissioner Braley.
Second that motion?
There's a motion and a second for approval of Z-11-19-12. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Commissioner Braley.
Let's make a motion that we approve SB 32-19-12 preliminary site plan for Bellmont Promenade, subject to staff recommendation.
Is there a second? Commissioner Montgomery.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of SP-32-19-12 per staff recommendations. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for bringing the project forward in the city of Shawnee. Next on the agenda is other business. Does the staff have any other business for us wonderful commissioners setting up here? Yes, Stephanie?
All right, got my mic on. One quick announcement. We do have the Chris Kindle Market this weekend, and Lauren's not here tonight, but she's working very hard on that event. So if you're available on Saturday, please feel free to come out to the event. We would love to have you there.
From 2 to 6 p.m., and that's at 5:30 is the mayor's Christmas tree lighting. Is that correct?
If you know those dates and times, then you probably know the right one. So I appreciate that.
You know, she's so nice when I screw up. She doesn't even say anything. She's so damn nice. I screw up, and she just really...
I just know the
she's
day,
good
so
at
I'm
it.
glad you know the time. Thank you for supplementing my announcement.
All right. Does the commission have anything for staff? I have one thing for the whole commission, and that is I read this last time, and I've said on most of this on the public comments portion of it. I've used I in that because really didn't have it an opportunity to bring it in front of the commission on whether you think that's appropriate before public comments on what I'm reading. And if you have any other thoughts on it, then let me know, because I would certainly be glad to change it to we rather than just me if the commission approves of that. I think essentially reminding them of some things we expect before they speak in front of us may help us, and I think it helped us actually last meeting somewhat too. So if there's no objection, then I'd like to change that to we and make that a part of our normal comments before any comment period. So if that's okay, I'll type them up then and put them in front of everybody.
So, Chairman?
Commissioner Beanhawk.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I believe at the city council meetings, comments are limited to 5 minutes.
Right,
So,
and they can get another 5 minutes.
yeah. So you're I think finding that guidance and reminding people to stick to the subject is certainly appropriate.
And Bruce, I actually didn't use 5 minutes because I hate to really pin it down. A lot of the people that come up in front of us, seemingly I think they're walking into some kind of other thing other than the facility of the city. And so just putting a limit of 5 minutes on it, to me, I don't really like that. But having it said, if you just are dilly-dallying around, then we have the ability to ask him to speed it up or eventually ask him to stop.
I agree with that. I was not suggesting
I'm sorry.
5 minute limit. I was comparing.
See, even Bruce is nice when I screw up. That's so wonderful up here. Commissioner Peterson. Please, suggest. And your suggestion would be? Other than long-winded, do you have another verbiage? Commissioner Nunnick?
I would just say, please keep your comments concise and to the matter at hand. You're not telling them not to be thorough, but I think concise is appropriate, and I think to the matter at hand. So in other words, don't repeat yourself and address what we're talking about. We do.
I'll change it to concise, then no problem. Commissioner Wise.
So, just to confirm, so what you're saying is we do this before all comment periods. What we're doing is we're not doing it just for ones we think are going to be, what I'll say, contentious. And that way, we're just being consistent throughout. And it's not just because it might be short, it might be long. We're just doing it every time. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think so. And then it becomes a matter of this is just the way we run our meetings. And so consequently, we're not looking, then for everybody gets to hear the same thing, that this is where we'll run our meetings.
I think it's less controversial that way than saying, okay, this one's going to be difficult, so we're going to read the rules. It's just now it's the same. So right. I agree with that approach.
So if we just use it at every time there's a comment period.
Or just before every meeting, the first comment period of the meeting instead of...
That's a nice point. And I wonder, if they're listening to a staff report that takes 15 minutes or so, then I'm not sure they remember. And if they're not going to comment, which we had one tonight where they weren't going to comment, so consequently I didn't have to read it. If somebody wants to stand up, then we go through the comments. If nobody does, then it's somewhat a waste of time to me, but I'm
fine with that. So we got to try and adjust as needed.
Yep. So, okay, we'll change the word to concise or something and change a bunch of it to we, which I'd be much prefer saying we on some of that stuff. So anything else? Can I ask a question of the staff here? Do we have a lot on the agenda for the next meeting? Yeah. Doug, I do know how many times, one of the interesting things, and just talking with Doug too, some of the other things I brought up with him are kind of like, well, what are we going to do on scooters? And actually, some of these things are surprising because staff is already working on them. They're not just going to come to us and say, hey, what do you guys think on scooters? What do you think on some of these other things? That in reality, staff behind the scenes is already beginning to formulate what kind of policy we should consider. And I had asked Doug if we could have a long discussion about the inventory of public parking in Shawnee, because it's simply a matter of hearing about March or April, the theater over there is going to be open, is what I hear. And at that point in time, basically all their parking will come from the public parking, which is City Hall, et cetera. I'm sorry?
That's what I thought last week.
So, it's interesting. Are there other things that the staff is already working on that you guys are trying to figure out how you want to handle stuff that you want to share with us that are kind of interesting?
I would say that as a city, we actually work as a management team staff on a legislative agenda, and it is issues from everything from scooters and birds to tobacco 21 and all kinds of things, separation requirements. There's a litany of things that we are working on behind the scenes. And I've talked to Dennis, I need to get better at keeping you guys informed. And so some of these moves where we don't have in a very informal work talks and chats about what's going on. Travel all over. You see, I know we talked about I think when I was fortunate enough to get the job, we talked about that. And things are starting to slow down for me a little bit, believe it or not. So I hope things calm down in terms of news. If we have some short news, just have some discussion about issues that are pertinent to you. You guys are the liaison to the citizens of this city. So we're going down a path. They think the density is great, and maybe that's the wrong path, and we're going to know that for sure once we go down to reimagine the new strategic plan for the city. We're going to do all kinds of things. Obviously, we'll be talking to you all about that too.
Commissioner Braley.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot, and actually, it's kind of touching on something that it seems like we'll see other things happening in adjacent cities, and then it makes me wonder, hey, what is our position on that? And let's use it for example that's really current in Lenexa, dealing with the homeless shelter special use permit out of the church. Interesting, don't have enough information on it. So, like, where do we stand on that? So that would be another one of those topics. Let's be a little bit more proactive than reactive in some of the things that we know that are coming, and how are we going to address those issues? Yeah. Yeah.
I think you guys are forward. Want to be ahead of the game.
Okay.
All figuring out what our new jobs are.
Yeah.
Please, that's what they're on with. Right?
Chairman, comment, question for Doug?
Commissioner Beanhoff.
Doug, I got a question about, I'm not sure what jurisdiction it would fall under, but at the Advanced Auto Parts parking lot on the east side, over the last couple of years, it looks like they've collected a number of junk vehicles, I would refer to them, flat tires, appear to be unusable or unused, just sitting at the edge of their lot. So if you could.
Check it out.
Thank you.
I think a lot of I used to drive that, but I'm going down.
Quivira.
Because of what?
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
So those are the type of things.
Yeah. Sure.
Commissioner Roth.
So you brought up scooters. Has there been discussions with Bird about bringing scooters? And the reason I ask is there's been 4 or 5 over by our house in Western Shawnee there. So are they here? Is it just someone stole scooters? What? I know there's boundaries they set for those things. So what do we know about that?
Do not have $30 an hour. So at this point, we don't have all of it.
Okay.
We're trying to figure it out.
I don't think they go 35, just so you know. I've been on them. They go like 10 maybe. I don't know. Just so I did want to mention is they're notorious for just dropping bird scooters off throughout your city. So I don't know if that discussion's been had, but probably need to be preemptive. Yeah.
An interesting discussion behind the scenes, the Goodwill-ish Twilight Rabbits. As we research and find out. I've had conversations with people talking to our microphone's still on. Large TVs, two TVs that didn't even know that they were there. They were broken. And it cost this developer, owner, or manager about $500.
Are they still recording?
Okay. And didn't even know that the facility was on.
That's why I said some of these things Doug's talking about, I've asked him about, and he's told me that behind the scenes the staff is working on it, which is like, and I just soon have them work on some kind of plan before they come in front of us. And so it's kind of interesting what they're working on that I sometimes think and go, wow, they're already thinking about that too. So anyway, Commissioner Peterson.
I know you mentioned on the occasions where we have maybe a shorter meeting where we have a work session. Is there some way that maybe you could even give us a bullet point list? No discussion of 10, 15 things that you're working on, like a brain dump?
Yeah.
Just so that we're aware of it and maybe we can choose to assist with that, maybe do additional research?
Everything from signage to ordinance revisions, our mixed-use zoning is, as Sue was saying, I sometimes has some issues and needs some refinement. There's a lot of things on the list to do with pick and choose. But yeah, we could do that. I was even thinking, you remember when I very first started last year, I gave you a development summary review of all the stuff you guys had done the previous year and the millions of dollars of construction that had actually happened. And I created that report again this year and got busy and forgot to give it to you. So that's something I need.
And that you do in January, if I remember right. Yeah, so.
I did it early this year because they had a bond. They're trying to get AAA rating this year for the city, which sounds like the call went well, but they needed that information earlier this year. And so I prepared it for them, being our finance department, and so I should share that with you guys. I think you'd be surprised at the amount of projects.
And they did get the AAA rating because we're highest rating.
I've been ungone. I did, hopefully.
Yeah, they did get it. I got an email from somebody that said they did get that, which is in, which the cost, the difference in cost of the city borrowing on that AAA rating is just an incredible amount of money.
On our capital projects, so it's another hundreds of thousands on percentage drop by having AAA. And we were well rated bond-wise forever, but our accounting procedures and everything are top-notch. So I'm glad I hadn't heard that. Sorry, I'm talking to.
That's all right. You know I don't like these meetings, and especially I'm used to being here till 11:15 at night. You know, I'm used to this now. Commissioner Peterson.
I move we adjourn.
That's the shortest thing you've said in 2 years up here.
Being long-winded.
I know. We like you being concise. There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Commissioner Wise. Commissioner Wise seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. And
What do you think about the Westbrook?
None? Um,